Today on the podcast, we're going to finish up with Julia Ross. We're going to talk about the key differences between animal and supposed vegetable proteins, as well as what the effect on the kidneys is, what to expect when you are suddenly increasing your caloric intake, and the answers to questions from our audience on the Nutrition Heretic podcast coming up next. So I'm sure you've heard that as you age, it gets harder to lose weight. Well, that's total bullshit because my friends Laura and Veronica Chows, they can prove it. They're a mother-daughter duo, and they've lost 125 pounds between the two of them at ages 50 and 20. And they've kept it off for over 2 years without starvation, deprivation, or hunger. So now you can learn their system and a whole lot more with a free 10-day trial to their online membership. They'll give you the diet, the recipes, classes, and more. Sign up today at nutritionheretic.com/utmostdiet.
Fat is bad for you.
I just pop a pill and I'm fine.
Meat is murder.
It's time for bad food punishment. It's time for real nourishment. It's time for the Nutrition Heretic.
The following program is provided as information only and may not be construed as medical or health advice. It is not intended to diagnose, treat, or cure any disease. No action or inaction should be taken solely on the basis of the information provided here. Please consult with a licensed healthcare professional or doctor on any matter relating to your health and well-being. What are you looking at as far as the proportion of protein to fat to carb that is, and how do you justify that, let's say?
Well, let's take the historical record again. In the 60s, when we had normal weight, good health, no diabetes, we were getting most of our calories from protein sources. And that was primarily animal protein, including dairy, and nuts and seeds. So that was about 45% of the diet.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was the primary source of our calories. And we were getting about 20% vegetables and fruits instead of 8%. And apparently most of it is tomato paste and fruit juice. But at any rate, so when we were getting, the balance was fat. And of course, a lot of the protein sources were fatty. Nuts and seeds, meats, dairy products were all full fat at that time. So the historical record is very clear. We don't have to be afraid of protein. We don't have to be afraid of fat. And we don't have to be afraid of unrefined carbohydrates. But we have to be afraid of our cravings for the drug foods.
Right.
And we have to be afraid of the cult diet gurus who are so persuasive in their modern inventions. They're not based on the historical realities. They're mostly not based on real research either.
Yes, exactly. I think a lot of it is based on emotion, especially when you start getting into some of the, these ancillary diets, the macrobiotic and yada, yada, yada. And they have these very passionate videos of, just animals being shredded because they're expendable. And, the filth in the dairy companies and things like that. They're not really showing you how disgusting the processing of a soy burger is.
Well, they're not acknowledging the fact that because we have a conscience where, living things are concerned, we have been improving things. There's tons of pasture-raised animal life on the planet now that never existed before. I shouldn't say never. 70s, it stopped. The factory farming of animals started in the 70s too. I'm telling you, everything bad happened in the 70s. In terms of food, the music was great, but Uh, at any rate, we're doing great things. What's the name of the autistic scientist who designed the new beef slaughtering procedures?
Oh, I don't know.
Oh, I'll get you the information, but I can't remember what her name is. There was a beautiful film done about her. She designed a circular funnel that the cattle moved through and that do move through. I mean, this is a very successful enterprise, her invention.
That's not Temple Grandin.
I think it is.
Temple Grandin,
yes.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I didn't realize that was okay.
So they don't suffer. They don't have any anticipation of what's happening at the end in the process of going through this curving maze that they go through. At any rate, we're really working on that. It's not that anybody is saying, oh, let's torture animals. It's let's do it all. Let's save ourselves and keep the animals as comfortable as possible. I don't think anybody would agree that slaughtering animals is a wonderful practice. I wish we didn't need animal protein as badly as we do.
But I mean, and that's just a difference in, to some extent, with my parents come from Jamaica, which is, for all intents and purposes, a third world country. In the third world, that's kind of the least of most people's concerns, to be honest. And I think to some extent, and this may sound callous, it may sound ignorant, I don't really care. But I think that what's happening now is that we're seeing people with a little too much time in their hands. It's kind of a testament to how far we have been able to come and how cushy our lives have become. And we've become very, very much looking for causes to take up. Is the way I feel sometimes. I think that our passions are getting the best of us, or the better of us. So you would say that with this, the fear of kidney disease, let's say, by eating more protein, that's something that we should not worry about.
No, it's definitely something we should not worry about. And there's good research confirming that meat eating never was and still isn't a threat to the kidney.
Right. Yes, and exactly. But for some reason, those kidney studies or hearsay of kidney studies keep showing up in people's literature. And I blame something called PLR content. I don't know if you know what that is.
No.
Okay. It's private label rights content. And there are people who write these very general articles on different, it could be anything. It could be anything from, marketing to tennis to what we should eat. And they write these to make it easier for bloggers to, I'm giving away all the trade secrets, to make it easier for bloggers to create content, particularly the bloggers who are in it just for the money. So what they do is they sell this off for, $7-10 a pop, and everybody just publishes it. So when you go to the first page of Google on whatever your search term is, let's just say high protein diet, and suddenly there is all of this information saying almost verbatim the same exact thing is wrong with a high protein diet.
Uh-huh.
And it's all this PLR content, and you can always tell those websites because they don't necessarily say that they've researched anything. They have a ton of ads. It's all about the ads, just to get the clicks and the ad revenue. And I think this is a huge problem in perpetuating these myths.
I didn't realize that was another feature of the problem, but it's stubborn. That's why my new book is going to be so heavily researched, because I'm taking on so many different cult-like convictions,
right?
And I want them to know why,
right?
And it's partly from my experience, which is more extensive than most other holistic health professionals can claim, and partly because of my age, that I've lived through these changes and know what diet can be and what health can be as a result of more traditional diets. But it's also because the science is desperate, to find answers, and there are people all around the world with real integrity doing their little jobs, and focusing on some area to find the truth in it and clarify some of these opinions that we have. And so I'm happy to present what I feel is substantive scientific support for these traditional common sense views that I think are our only hope.
Right, absolutely. I have to back up. I want to talk to you more about your book, and then I'm going to let you go. But I want to find out, because I think this is going to be the burning question for a lot of people. We're talking about going potentially back to 2,100 calories a day, right? This is what women and men were eating minimum at a time when obesity was low, when they were whistling, walking down the street. Of course, they weren't doing that where I grew up in the Bronx, but, you know, we had our own version of that. And then we talked about The Biggest Loser. And I guess where I'm going with this is, what is the expectation? We know that everybody's different, but people are always worried when they start, for example, eating high fat or something that makes more sense, because they knew that they couldn't lose weight the other way. But they've been doing these starvation diets for so long. They're down to 1,200 calories, 700 calories. Now we're talking about going up to 2,100 calories. And now when they went from 7 to 1,200, they were already complaining that they're gaining weight. What's going to happen? What would be a realistic expectation of someone, even, you know, balancing out the brain chemistry and still going to that higher number of calories? Should they expect initially to gain some weight? Will they see a stall before anything starts to come off? What would be the reasonable expectation from anyone?
Well, there isn't one expectation, because different people respond metabolically differently and at different rates to, you know, the dietary trauma that we're undergoing. And so, for example, we've had many people who have a long history of dieting, but they can still lose weight. And those people have no problem. You know, 2,100 calories, fine, that's a piece of cake, as they say. And
it took me a while, but yeah, I got that.
And they do fine. You know, they lose weight. It's at a reasonable pace, because frankly, we're terrified of fast weight loss, you know, inflicting more of this metabolic slowdown on people. So we want to keep it as slow as possible and still keep their faith. But there are other people who have, I'm thinking of a woman who did a number of very low calorie diets. I'm talking the medically monitored 400 calorie a day, 500 calorie a day diets. And she got to the point on her third or fourth of those where she was gaining weight on 500 calories a day.
Yeah.
That's how slow her metabolism had become. And with people like that, it could go either way. We don't know, you know, some of them, as soon as they get enough calories, you know, like a lot of people are trying to chronically maintain at like somewhere between 1,200 and 1,800 calories. And if we can just get them to go up 300, 400 calories a day, just for a few days to see what happens. And typically they lose weight right away.
Wow.
But there are other people whose, you know, calorie cutting trauma has really done something permanent to their thyroid function.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we get somebody, like I'm thinking of a woman in her late 50s who came to us, who was doing that somewhere between 1,200 and 1,700 calories when she got to us. And she was under the illusion that she was eating too much because she had continued to gain weight.
Exactly.
And so I explained to her that, you know, in her case, there was a family history of thyroid disorder, and she had gained weight, you know, early in life, and had, you know, sort of desperately clung to these low-calorie meals, mostly frozen meals, to, you know, keep her plate limited. And she knew, because she tried it, that if she increased the amount of food, that she would gain weight, even though it was a moderate amount, just a few hundred calories.
Right.
So, but she had never done any sort of a food plan that emphasized protein and saturated fat and de-emphasized even whole carbohydrates as much as the diet that we were proposing to her. And she was frankly too scared to try it. So where we started with her was getting a thyroid workup. And the Diet Cure book has 2 chapters on thyroid because we found this low-calorie diet creating thyroid dysfunction.
Right.
So it explains what kind of testing you need to get and what the interpretation of the results should look like, so that people know whether that is in fact an aspect. Because every time we reduce calories to starvation levels, the thyroid will slow down.
Yes.
The question is, and it varies so much between person to person, whether it will bounce back or not when calories increase. And some people it does, and some people it doesn't. So unfortunately, what we've learned is that the weight gain crisis that we're suffering is extremely complex. There are profound genetic changes that occur during starvation. For one thing, hormonal changes. The article that announced the Biggest Loser study also talked about another study, a very low-calorie diet, 500-calorie medically monitored diet, and the testing before and after showing these radical changes in the hormone output that regulates weight gain.
Right.
That it was all reversed by the starvation. It wasn't just the thyroid. There were 4, 5, 6 different hormones all turning in this terrible direction. So what we need is to understand that it isn't self-discipline, it isn't willpower, it's really biochemical.
Thank you for saying that. Because I get so frustrated when I hear people just razz on people for being fat. It's all their fault. They have no willpower. And it's like, no, it's so far beyond that for so many people.
Well, I think a lot of it does come from the food industry because they're always saying, we don't make them choose this stuff.
We just don't give them another choice.
Well, no, but they don't acknowledge that the food is addictive. After the Diet Cure came out, I got a call from General Mills.
Oh,
Representative General Mills acknowledging all the problems with their cereals. And after he finished talking about the damaged fats and the damaged starches and the increasing amount of sugar and the fact that they marketed specifically to children, I said, yes, I agree, of course. I appreciate your acknowledging this, but what made you call me? And he said, well, in addition to everything I've just admitted, do you think that our food is also physically addicting? And of course, I said it was, and I had already published some of the proof of that in the Diet Cure at that time, and I told him I could get him more if he, really was interested. But this was at a time where the tobacco industry had already lost the legal battles and was paying the insurance company for the tobacco industry. All the companies that insured them were paying huge amounts. And the attorneys who had won those tobacco cases were turning towards the food companies. And so they knew that they were going to be under attack. And they were, at that time, desperate enough to call me. And they said something frightening when I said, why did you call me in the beginning of the conversation? He said, well, we like to stay on the cutting edge. They monitor what we're saying about them. They just don't listen. This is, these foods are highly addictive, and to think that people could just walk away from, let's say they were lacing Twinkies with heroin. If we found that out, we would understand why people couldn't stop eating Twinkies. But it's slow going to educate people about the actual hard drug nature of modern cuisine.
If we can call it that, yeah. But actually, what I'm curious about is when we talk about the calorie restriction, does it matter if the person was doing, let's say, a paleo diet, that's higher on the protein, possibly depending on who you're following, the fat scale, because I'm getting a lot of people now who are presenting with, I went paleo and I gained 30 pounds. But a lot of these paleo, high fat diets are still focusing on lowering those calories. Are they necessarily damaging their metabolism as much as someone who went the soybean route?
Absolutely, because if we don't get enough protein and carbohydrate and fat and calories, we're going to burn the fat and the protein to substitute for the carbs we're not getting anymore. And so many paleo people are physically active. They desperately need some carbohydrate.
Right.
So that, even though they're getting good quality food, it's getting transformed into the most basic cellular fuel because the body's just trying to survive, not get healthy. It can't get healthy.
Right.
And, so many people who are doing paleo are also, really into chocolate and really into caffeine.
Isn't that so funny?
And really into wine and alcohol. So, I think that it all, so I'm hoping, since there are so many different kinds of paleo now, that people have more to choose from. And I think that they're wise to be in that sort of area of dietary confusion. It's a little bit easier to find some rational paleo people, but I don't think we can trust anybody with a new idea about food. The paleo diet is an invention.
Yes.
Of Lauren Cordain, and it's not based on what they actually ate. Nobody really knows. And they were very different physiologically from we are. We don't have to go back to Paleolithic times to find healthy human beings. We have to go back to 1960, for heaven's sake.
But by the way, my Danish friend Britt Melka, she's Danish. She's from Denmark, and she was like, "But I thought Paleo Man had ovens. They were baking bread." And so, which paleo are we talking about? Because they've got their version of colonial Williamsburg in Denmark, and they've got ovens. It's for the Paleolithic era, and they're showing them baking.
Well, the baking did take place really a long time ago. They're finding, that they started to use grains, and they were healthy.
Yes.
But they were processing. The grains were soaked. They were fermented.
Right.
It was a different use of grain. At any rate.
Yeah, they weren't eating Cinnabons.
Right.
I do want to ask one question for one of our listeners. Actually, sorry, I have two. I forgot I had two questions for you, and we're gonna have to wrap it up quickly. I'm so sorry to do this to you. Maria Gladstone wants to know: sometimes I crave stuff that I haven't had for years, like grape soda. The other week, I was craving white jelly beans, specifically Brack's old-fashioned flavor of vanilla. I seriously think that it was a rainbow moonstone ring I was wearing. I guess it reminds me of them. Weird, but sometimes I read somewhere that magnesium contributes to contributes to cravings. Is this true?
Well, there's a myth that magnesium deficiency draws us to chocolate specifically, which contains magnesium among many other things, both good and bad. But I frankly don't want to spend much time on somebody who only thinks about jelly beans occasionally. We have people who are eating nothing but jelly beans, and those are the questions that I'm interested in. Right.
Well, I've known Maria actually for some time, and I know that she does have, she has had some problems. She's come a long way. Let me put it that way. But it still for her seems to be a very conscious effort to stay away from those foods. Whereas some people, you see what I'm saying? So she's not just someone who always eats great, but then has these little peccadillos. She's someone who she has to put all of her energy into it. And it does feel more like the willpower for her.
So she's more like the average American suffering from a toxic diet over a long period of time. And I would like to suggest to her that she get the diet cure, take the questionnaire, identify what part of her brain is setting off those cries for the foods that keep drawing her in, and do an inexpensive challenge. Just trial the amino acid or amino acids that are identified, and see it all quiet down.
Right. Yeah. And she does have there is a family history of alcoholism.
So the brain chemistry is set up
right.
Genetically, and then the American diet has eroded things so that people who were genetically prone are much more so now.
Yay! Yay, American diet. So I have Christina Ordonez or Ordonez. I'm not even sure. I thought there was an enye, a tilde over the end, but sorry, Christina. There's a popular gluten, dairy-free myth, mostly vegan diet that has a pretty big following in community. I used to be a fan before I came to my senses. One thing that always annoyed me is that they would post about eating a cheat meal of pizza or nachos, etc., and immediately felt an unhappy stomach. So they knew they weren't craving those foods anymore. So they knew they weren't craving those foods anymore, and that they didn't taste as good as they used to, and that obviously their bodies didn't want it anymore. I call bullshit. And I eat primarily a real food diet, but nachos and pizza still taste just as bomb as they always did. My question is, sorry I rambled, is that mental? Do they just think these things don't taste as good and mentally because these physical ailments, or does your body actually reject the food if you go long enough without eating it? Can you stop craving something if you go long enough without eating it? So there's a couple of questions in there. So I guess she's saying, if someone, are these people just making it up? Are they, I'm thinking they damage their metabolism, or they're just eating complete crap versions of nachos and pizza. But is it just that their body really is rejecting it, or is it their mental, let's say their ego, that wants their body to be so intuitively?
There is no way to hypothetically answer this.
Okay.
If you have a real person sitting here, you can find out what kind of a vegan diet have they had. If it was a big improvement over what they were eating before, then yeah, they may actually have reduced some of the toxicity and some of the cravings, if they're really working at getting enough vegetable protein, if they're a vegetarian who eats a lot of dairy and is one of those people who can digest dairy. So there are a lot of too many possibilities to conjecture about why those people feel such and such a way about food. My own experience is that the longer people have had a vegan diet, the more likely they are to start craving again. But the real issue is Christina's own relationship with food, and that she's still drawn to nachos and pizza. I don't know whether it's a problem for her, though,
right.
Since she primarily eats a real food diet. And the whole point of nachos and pizza is that they create the sensation of pleasure in the brain. So if they didn't taste good, it would be a complete failure by the food industry.
Right.
But it's not mental. They're really drug substances, and they have pleasurable effects on our brain. So we like them. And the question is, can we have them every once in a while, the way Christina is trying to do, and, get minimal damage in terms of addictiveness or health or weight consequences? If so, fine. People don't have to be absolutely rigid unless their biochemistry is so delicate, that they really don't have the latitude to have any toxicity. And I think people who are born, and raised on this kind of American diet, I think they've lost whatever, kind of strength they might have had for tolerating it. And typically our clients just want to get away from it. And as soon as the cravings die, which is very short order, they're off in the other direction. They're trying to find foods They're not trying to sneak the stuff back in.
Right. Well, see, I, the way I look at it, whether it's any of these popular foods, tacos and pizza and hamburgers, I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with them. It's the fast food version that's wrong. So in my home, we will make our pizza. My husband and I, we took a night off together, and a friend came and stayed with the kids. I made pizza shells and put them in the freezer, and my daughter she took out some real mozzarella. She ground up some tomatoes and made sauce, and they had pizza for dinner. I don't mind that. We know that we don't do it every day, just as we don't eat a steak every day. But I'm not opposed to a well-made, homemade nacho. And to be honest, because we do those things ourselves, we're not satisfied with the restaurant version. So it doesn't even come up most of the time when we go out. On rare occasion it will, but I'd be, hard pressed to say that anybody would ever finish it, because it's just, at that point you're just eating just to eat, not because it tastes good.
Uh-huh. Well, it's great. A lot of people have no idea what home-cooked food is like anymore.
And that's actually been a huge learning point for especially my 13-year-old, is that she will have her friends over and they sit down. They're like, oh my gosh, it's like a restaurant in here, because most of the time their moms are just telling them, go get some Hot Pockets and stick them in the microwave. And we're sitting down to like a real pancake breakfast with bacon and eggs. And we don't, I'm not totally opposed to doing those things. So like we do it once in a blue moon, once a month or once every 2 months, whatever. We have the pizza dinner or the hamburger dinner on a Friday night, just kind of our end of week. Let's watch a movie and do something, but we do it ourselves. And it's just really interesting to see kids who normally their parents complain that they won't eat anything. They come to our house and they're like, oh, that's good. That was a salad. That was good for a salad. I could eat that, that's,
hey, they never had a salad without wishbone dressing.
Oh yeah. Right. And my big thing right now is trying to source as much as possible locally. So when I make a salad, everything down to because we live in Hawaii, we have mac nut oil. I use mac nut oil instead of olive oil.
Aren't you lucky?
Exactly. I use limes from my landlady's tree, or my tree as my, souring agent. I use local honey if I want to make it a little bit sweeter. The vegetables grow in my garden or within a few miles of here. So it's, it's doable and it's not gross. I hate to burst anybody's bubble who says that eating like that is just not tasty, because my meals are pretty much all kid approved. and that's some of the hardest stuff. And oh, by the way, one of the things that your book woke me up to is that, the fatter the person, the pickier the person. Because we like to think of, popularly, we are told that fat people, people with weight issues, whatever, that they have no willpower, they can't control themselves, they eat everything in sight. And you see memes about it on Facebook all the time. But I would say that it's actually quite the opposite. I found that the heavier the person, the more likely they are to have some strange food hangups. And, to the point that they'll only eat those craving foods that you're talking about. But then you put something else in front of them and it can still be pretty processed. It's not even necessarily a matter of it being processed or not. And they just have these really weird flags that they throw up that say, I don't associate myself with that food. I don't eat that. So that's another one of the myths that I'd like to bust through. And if you can at all address that, I don't know if you feel the same way, but if you can at all address that in your upcoming book, I would love to read about it.
Well, great. I'm doing everything I can to get it published as quickly as possible. So I'll let you know when it comes out.
Do you have a title yet?
I can't
divulge that.
There are people who can write a book in about 2 months.
Yes.
So I've been sworn to secrecy by my publisher.
Ah, gotcha. Okay, well, please let us know when that book comes out. And that's going to, can you repeat for us what that's going to expose about our changing dietary world?
Well, what caused us to change our minds about the way we ate had been eating for hundreds of thousands of years in the 1970s, and what the repercussions have been, and how we can backtrack, change our minds based on very good new research about the value and safety of, for example, animal protein and saturated fat, and find our traditional weights and our traditional health again.
Right. Well, I commend you for the work that you're doing. It's so needed. I think you are absolutely right. We're at a tipping point where we are starting to come to our senses little by little. As I always say, the pendulum must swing. So we were on one extreme. Now we've gone to the other extreme, and slowly people are coming back to middle. And I've even seen this with my own Facebook group where people have left because they, had some promise of something else, whether it was on the vegan side or the paleo side. And somehow they're coming back. They show up again because they're like, you're the only one who doesn't totally say this is bad and that is bad. Because as you know, it's not always about good and bad. Sometimes it's just about a better choice. So, right.
It's a strange thing when people who are proponents of common sense are called heretics, but that's the way it's been for a while. So I hope you're right, and that people will be able to recover from what is potentially an irreversible health disaster.
Right, and not only for us, but for generations to come. Julia, can you remind us of your website and where people can find you?
They can go to dietcure.com, and one of the things they'll find there is that we have a virtual clinic for food cravers to help them with these amino acid therapy techniques that turn off the cravings. And then if their issues are more along the lines of negative moods, they can go to moodcure.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much for speaking with us. And definitely, guys, these books have very much shaped the way that I think. So if you like me, if you like anything that I've ever had to say on this podcast, you'll get the books, or at least the one that pertains to you, because they are truly just fabulous tomes of information about where we were and where we're going, and how you can harness the power of proper amino acid input into your body to get the output that you want. All right?
All right. So much.
Thanks so much. And you have a fantastic day. We're out.
You too.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. The Nutrition Heretic Podcast is a production of Savor the Journey, LLC. Our audio editor is Nikola Popovich. Our podcast manager is Crystal McLean, and our operations manager is Linda Hansen. I'm your host, Adrienne Hugh, the Nutrition Heretic. You can find us at nutritionheretic.com, where you can download the Nutrition Heretic's free shit list of 7 health foods to avoid like the plague. You can also listen to previous episodes at nutritionheretic.com/podcast. Be sure to like us on social media for updates. Our Facebook page is facebook.com/nutritionheretic, and on Twitter at NutriHeretic. Contact us with show ideas, questions, or if you just want to be a guest. And don't forget to rate our podcast on iTunes and Stitcher. Thanks.